The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin as passengers boarded Flight 247 from Washington to Newark. The usual shuffle of bags, murmured conversations and polite smiles filled the air. In first class, a tall, reserved teenager gazed out of the window. Barron Trump, now a young man of quiet demeanor and a commanding presence, thumbed through the pages of a thick hardcover book. Unlike his famous family members, Barron's public appearances were rare, his introverted nature evident as he kept to himself. Toward the rear of the plane, an elderly veteran shuffled down the aisle. His weathered military jacket bore faded patches, medals telling silent stories of battles long past. His silver hair and slow gait carried a quiet dignity that drew glances and hushed whispers from nearby passengers. As he reached his assigned seat in the cramped economy section, the veteran found himself sandwiched between a restless toddler and a fidgety businessman. His shoulders sagged slightly, though he made no complaint. Meanwhile, in first class, Barron noticed the veteran while adjusting his seatbelt. His eyes lingered briefly, noting the man's demeanor and the symbols of service adorning his jacket. He pressed the call button, summoning a flight attendant. "Excuse me," Barron said, his voice calm but resolute. "Could I switch seats with the gentleman in the military jacket?" The flight attendant blinked, momentarily stunned. Such requests were unusual, especially from a passenger in first class. She nodded and quickly made her way to the back of the plane. Moments later she returned, her expression one of quiet admiration. "He's willing to switch," she informed Barron. Without hesitation, Barron stood, grabbing his bag and nodding politely to the curious first-class passengers. As he walked down the narrow aisle, whispers trailed behind him. A woman seated nearby leaned toward her companion. "Isn't that Barron Trump? And he's giving up his seat." In the economy section, the elderly veteran looked up as Barron approached. "Are you sure about this, young man?" he asked, his voice steady but touched with surprise. Barron offered a small smile. "You've done more for this country than I ever could. Please take my seat. It's the least I can do." The veteran hesitated, his eyes searching Barron's face for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, he stood and clasped Barron's hand firmly. "Thank you, son. This means more than you know." As the veteran settled into the plush first-class seat, the atmosphere aboard the plane began to shift. Passengers whispered in awe, some discreetly snapping photos. In economy, Barron folded his tall frame into the smaller seat, reopening his book as though nothing had happened. But the story was far from over. As the flight reached cruising altitude, the veteran, now comfortably seated in first class, struck up a quiet conversation with the woman seated beside him. "That young man who gave me this seat," he began, his voice carrying the weight of a memory long buried. "His family once saved my life." The woman's brow furrowed in curiosity. "What do you mean?" The veteran adjusted a small purple heart pin on his lapel and sighed deeply. "It was decades ago, after the Vietnam War. I came back broken both in body and spirit. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. One day I found myself outside a diner in Queens, trying to scrape together enough for a meal. A man noticed me. He didn't just hand me $1 and walk away. He sat down, listened to my story and gave me a job." The woman leaned closer, captivated. "Who was he?" "Fred Trump," the veteran said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Donald Trump's father. He didn't owe me anything, but he gave me a roof over my head and a chance to rebuild my life. I've carried that kindness with me ever since." By now, nearby passengers were eavesdropping openly, their expressions a mix of astonishment and admiration. The story spread like wildfire through the cabin, whispers reaching even the economy section where Barron sat, oblivious to the unfolding revelation. As the flight attendants began their service, one paused by the veteran's seat. "Would you like me to tell him what you just shared?" she asked softly. The veteran shook his head. "Not yet. Let the boy have his peace. He doesn't need to know how much this means to me." Back in economy, Barron noticed the occasional glance in his direction but paid little attention. He remained engrossed in his book, unaware that his simple act of kindness had sparked something extraordinary. When the plane began its descent into Newark, the veteran stood, his resolve firm. As passengers gathered their belongings, he made his way to the back of the plane, stopping in front of Barron's seat. The cabin fell silent. "Young man," the veteran said, extending his hand. "I just wanted to thank you face to face. What you did today brought me full circle. Your family has a legacy of kindness and you've carried it forward. Never forget how much these moments matter." Barron stood, shaking the man's hand firmly. His voice was quiet but steady. "I didn't do anything special, sir. You deserved it." The veteran's eyes glistened as he nodded. "Your grandfather would be proud." As the passengers disembarked, many paused to thank Barron or offer a kind word to the veteran. The mood was unlike any flight before, a shared sense of humanity lingering in the air. Later, as Barron walked through the terminal, he pulled out his phone and typed a brief message. He hesitated, then hit send. The text read, "Grandpa would have been proud today." This story is a reminder of the ripple effect of kindness. How one small act can transcend generations, connecting people in ways we never anticipate. If this inspired you, don't forget to share it. Let's keep the conversation going and remind the world that kindness still matters.